Sleep didn't come that night. Sarah lay beside Marcus, listening to his steady breathing, studying the familiar outline of his profile in the darkness. She thought about all the signs she'd missed or chosen to ignore. The credit card charges at restaurants she'd never been to, the suddenly improved wardrobe, the way he'd started working out again after years of complaints about not having time. Most painful of all was remembering how she'd actually been happy about some of these changes. She'd thought he was finally taking care of himself, finally seeming more confident and energetic. She'd even complimented his new shirts, his fresh haircut, his sudden interest in staying in shape. She'd been cheering on his affair without even knowing it. Morning came gray and cold, matching Sarah's mood perfectly. Marcus was already gone by the time she woke up, which wasn't unusual anymore but felt especially cruel today. A note on the kitchen counter informed her he'd be late again tonight. Client dinner, he'd written in his familiar handwriting. The same excuse he'd been using for weeks. Sarah spent the day in a haze, going through the motions of her routine while her mind replayed every interaction, every conversation, every moment that should have told her what was happening. She called in sick to work, unable to imagine facing her colleagues and pretending everything was normal when her entire world was crumbling. The afternoon brought unexpected courage. Sarah found herself driving to Marcus's office, though she couldn't say exactly why. Maybe she hoped to catch him in the act, maybe she just needed to see him in his natural environment, to understand how he could compartmentalize their life so completely. His secretary, Janet, greeted her with surprise and something that looked almost like pity. Did everyone know? Were she and Marcus the office gossip? The cautionary tale about marriages that slowly die while everyone watches. Marcus wasn't there. Client meeting, Janet explained, though her eyes wouldn't meet Sarah's. He wouldn't be back today. Sarah nodded and left, feeling smaller and more foolish than ever. That evening, Sarah made Marcus's favorite dinner, though she couldn't explain why. Perhaps it was muscle memory, perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was her way of saying goodbye to the woman she'd been for 15 years. When he arrived home, 2 hours later than promised, he seemed genuinely touched by the gesture. For a moment, he looked like the man she'd married, grateful and affectionate and present. They talked over dinner like they hadn't in months. Real conversation, not just logistics and schedules. Marcus told her about his day, though Sarah noticed he was careful about details, vague about times and places. She told him about a book she was reading, a movie she wanted to see. For an hour, they almost felt like themselves again. But then his phone buzzed, and Sarah watched his face change. The mask slipped back into place, the distance returned to his eyes. He glanced at the message and she saw it, just for a second, the softness that crossed his features. The look of a man remembering he was loved, just not by his wife. The revelation that would change everything was still hours away. Sarah had no idea that the lipstick stain was about to be the least shocking discovery of her marriage. She had no idea that Marcus's secret would turn out to be something far more complex than a simple affair. She had no idea that by tomorrow night, she'd understand why some betrayals cut so deep they actually set you free. As she watched Marcus excuse himself to take a call in his study, Sarah made a decision. She was done being a ghost in her own life. Whatever came next, whatever truth was waiting to be uncovered, she was ready to face it. The woman who had trembled over a lipstick stain that morning was gone. In her place sat someone stronger, someone who deserved answers, someone who deserved better than living as a stranger in her own marriage. The truth, when it finally came, would be nothing like what she expected. But sometimes the most devastating discoveries lead to the most unexpected beginnings. Sarah's heart stopped the moment she saw it. A crimson stain on the collar of her husband's white dress shirt, bright as fresh blood against the pristine fabric. But this wasn't blood, this was lipstick, a shade she'd never owned, never worn, never even considered buying. Her hands trembled as she held the shirt up to the light, hoping desperately that her eyes were playing tricks on her. They weren't. Marcus had been acting strange for weeks. Late nights at the office, mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and that new cologne that made her stomach turn every time he kissed her goodbye. She'd pushed down the suspicions, told herself she was being paranoid, that 15 years of marriage meant something. But here it was. The evidence she'd prayed she'd never find, staring back at her in vivid red. She sank onto their bed, the same bed where they'd made love just 3 nights ago, where he'd whispered how much he adored her, where they'd planned their anniversary trip to Paris. The shirt fell from her numb fingers like a confession, landing in a crumpled heap on the hardwood floor they'd installed together last spring. The front door slammed downstairs. Marcus was home early, which hadn't happened in months. Sarah quickly stuffed the shirt back into the hamper, her mind racing. Should she confront him immediately? Should she wait, gather more evidence, hire a private investigator like those women in the movies? Her reflection in their bedroom mirror looked pale and hollow, a ghost of the confident woman she'd been that morning. Marcus's footsteps echoed up the stairs, each one like a nail in the coffin of their marriage. She forced herself to breathe normally, to arrange her face into something resembling normalcy. He appeared in the doorway, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his tie loosened in that way that used to make her heart skip. Now it just made her nauseous. He looked different somehow, younger maybe, with a lightness in his step that she hadn't seen in years. There was color in his cheeks and a brightness in his eyes that used to be reserved only for her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He was happy. He was glowing with the kind of joy that comes from being desired, from feeling alive, from falling in love with someone else. Sarah watched him move through their bedroom, hanging up his jacket with unusual care, humming under his breath. When had he stopped humming around her? When had the comfortable silences between them turned cold and distant? She tried to remember the last time he'd looked at her the way he was looking at himself in the mirror right now, with appreciation and something that looked almost like pride. He turned to her then, and for a split second, guilt flickered across his features before he masked it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The smile he'd been giving her for months now, she realized. Polite, distant, obligatory. That night at dinner, Sarah studied her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. Really seeing him. The way he checked his phone constantly. The way he seemed distracted even when trying to engage in conversation. The way he avoided her gaze when she asked about his day. She pushed food around her plate, each bite tasting like cardboard, while Marcus ate with an appetite she hadn't seen in years. He went to shower after dinner, and Sarah found herself standing outside the bathroom door, listening to him sing. Actually sing. When had he stopped singing in the shower at home? The melody was unfamiliar, probably something new, something that reminded him of her. The other woman. Sarah pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door and closed her eyes, trying to imagine what she looked like. Young, probably. Beautiful, certainly. Everything Sarah felt she was no longer. The shower turned off, and Sarah hurried back to the kitchen, desperate to look busy. She scrubbed dishes that were already clean, wiped counters that didn't need wiping, anything to avoid the mirror of her own thoughts. Marcus emerged 20 minutes later, smelling like that new cologne again, his hair styled in a way she didn't recognize. He kissed her forehead before heading to his study, a brief, perfunctory gesture that felt more like an apology than affection. Sarah watched him go, noting how he moved with purpose now, how he seemed to have somewhere to be even when he was home. She wondered if he was texting her right now, if he was counting the minutes until he could see her again, if he thought about her when he was supposed to be thinking about his wife.